The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja on Tuesday sentenced the Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba, to 3 months in prison for flouting a 2011 court order. The Inspector General of Police's commuter followed a suit that was filed by a police officer, Mr. Patrick Okoli, who was unlawfully and compulsorily retired from the Nigerian police force. The court also ordered a payment of 10 million naira to the applicant, doing special and general damages for the unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional denial of his rights and privileges as a senior officer of the Nigerian police force from 1993 to date. Joining us on this show now, as we discuss this latest ruling against the Inspector General of Police, is Liborous Oshoma, a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, Liborous, the details are stated, but beyond that, the Inspector General of Police, speaking through the police PRO, Abayomi, says, well, the IGP is not aware of this matter. And in any case, this case started in 1992, just a few months after the present Inspector General of Police joined the police force. And the matter has been there from 92 to 2011 till now. And but he has asked the head of the legal unit of the Nigerian police force to investigate and advise him appropriately. But that speaking for himself, he's not aware of the matter. So what happened here? Is it that the legal unit of the police force is failed to do his job? Or is he Inspector General of Police innocent, since this matter had been there even when he was just a junior officer in the police force?
First and foremost, because if he did say that he was aware, I would have been surprised. Because the usual defense is we are not aware. Even Attorney General's federal government will always tell you we are not aware of this order, or we're not aware of the matter, or we have not been served. So it is the usual cliche. So I'm not taken aback, I'm not surprised by that. But that said, here we say the windmill of justice grinds slowly but surely. But we forget that justice delayed is justice denied. This is a matter, an order that had been granted since 2011. Somebody was dismissed summarily, unlawfully in 1993. He approached the court. From 1993, he didn't get judgment until 2011. Look at the length of time. And from that 2011 to date, even though the police service commission had asked that he'd been reinstated, IGs have come and gone. And yet, either the file is nowhere to be found or is kept somewhere, despite the order coming from a court. If you remember, in that same 2011, Justice Ajoke Adepoju in Abuja did also ask the then IG, Afiz Ringim, to come show cause why he should not be committed to prison for a different matter. In 2018, it was Ibrahim Idris and Justice Origi, of the Federal High Court in Abuja also. 2019, as early as 2019, Abubakar Mohamedi, same IG of police, there was a court, almost another court order of committal by Justice Dorcas Agishi in Jos. So all of this, what this points to is the fact that the police consistently had flouted and disobeyed court order. And that, like the Supreme Court had said, when you disobey a court order, it is not the judge that you are flouting its order. It is justice that you are flouting its order. And that's why, by the provisions of Section 72 of the Sheriff and Civil Processes Act, it empowers the court to enforce its order. And if you now go further to Order 9, Rule 13 of the Judgment Enforcement Rules, for the court to commit you for contempt ex facie, you would have been served with Form 48 and Form 49. And in most cases, in all cases, these forms are served personally. But in 2019, when 2018, Ibrahim Idris when the defense lawyer attempted to file a preliminary objection that the Form 48 was not served personally on the IG, but it was served on the Commissioner of Police of the FCT. The judge ruled that that was an attempt on technicality, that the moment that document was brought to the notice of the police commissioner in FCT, that it is presumed that the police commissioner had brought it to the notice of the IG, but that the police, now attempting to use technicality, ignored those processes. And also, Form 48, when Form 48 is issued by the registrar and served, the order made by the court is attached, and you're given 48 hours to explain why you should not be committed for flouting a court order. So I've taken time to explain all of this so that our listeners, our viewers will understand that this attempt at no, now we want to investigate what transpired. And also the IG should also know that you inherit both asset and liability of the office. It is not you in person. It is the office. The order was directed at the Inspector General of Police. And if you are the Inspector General of Police now, what you should do is to comply with orders that have been issued against that office. The one against the FCC said the moment he came, he assumed office, he took steps to enforcing that order. Not because it was an order, he was not aware that he was in the office, or he was not in the office as at the time the order was made. It is not a defense. The moment you became aware of this matter, not the order now, this matter, what did you do? The Police Service Commission has asked that the police should reinstate. Now, the man probably would have been very old, since 1993 till date, and asked that police should pay compensation to him. And typical of the Nigerian public institutions, they went to sleep. Who is the judge? And I like the fact that the courts now are taking these steps. Unlike before, what you hear, come and show cause, and then they keep adjourning the matter ad infinitum. But now the courts are being decisive. Maybe, just maybe, someday we'll have a president who will say, since there's an order against you, step aside, go cool off, go take a room in Kuje prison until you purge yourself of this contempt.
So why can't we have a president that will be able to say that to public officials in this country? I mean, because this happened just not quite long. You remember with the EFCC case? Why are we not? The last time I checked, they don't have access to immunity. Or does the police IGP have immunity in this country? Isn't the law supposed to be the law? Didn't we, if you want to argue that, didn't we see the way Tafa Balogun was treated when he fell out of favor?
Yes. And Rufai, we've had situation in this country. If you remember, during Obasanjo's era, the government violated and flouted court order, including Supreme Court order, and their defense then was, we are studying the judgment. Remember the area Boy of Joe as Attorney General, we are studying the order. When Yaradua came, it was so bad. The impunity against court order was so bad that one of Yaradua's 7-point agenda was obedience to the rule of law, compliance with court orders. And now, what do we have? The president, Buhari's administration, remember during when the government came on board, the court granted bail to Sambo Dasuki, and the president was quoted on air as saying, you want me to release a man whose action led to the death of so many people. That means the president sat on appeal on a court order. And some people, including some senior lawyers, clapped for him and tried to rationalize it, forgetting that the court, what the court says is the position of the law. And so that also encouraged EFCC. People like Magu, you find situations where court orders are given and EFCC will violate and flout the court order. We had cases where somebody will file for enforcement of that fundamental human right at the Federal High Court here in Lagos. The court will grant that order, and immediately he steps out of court, he will be rearrested by the FCC, sometimes by the police, and the heavens will not fall. Nothing will happen. The president, like you said this morning, nobody will address anything, nobody will say anything. So all of this, when impunity is allowed to fester, it becomes the norm. And that's why you find situations where gradually almost every government institution started flouting court orders. They tell you, we are not aware of this order. So now, what's in the build-up to the general election, these are some of the questions we need to begin to ask ourselves. In situations like this, as minute as this is, do you know that this has become a topic for discussion now? Because the question would be, who will arrest the IG? Who will arrest the IG? I watched a documentary where the President of America gave instructions to an FBI agent who was working in the White House, and he said, I don't take instructions from the president. I take instructions from America. So here, we don't have a country called Nigeria where you say, yes, courts had given an order because the court is representing the country. They enforce rules. And yet so
that what you're saying is that people are bigger than the laws of the land.
Yes, that's what has shown consistently.
Is that what you're saying? That's why citizens are harassed. They are picked up on the road. They're harassed because they offend some people and all of that is happening.
And the court will ask that those citizens be produced before the court. Okay. And the police will tell you that they have not been served with the order or they are not aware. And in some cases, the persons die in questionable circumstances and the matter ends there.
Okay, by way of trying to put a fence around this. One, ignorance is no defense.
No, not at all.
So the Inspector General of Police cannot say, oh, I'm not aware.
Yeah.
So that's no defense. Number two, nobody is above the law.
Yes, but some people are above the law.
Even when you enjoy immunity, that immunity is not forever.
No,
the moment you leave that position, and the Inspector General of Police does not enjoy any immunity. But the question now, you said is contempt as fascikuria. That's contempt away from the face of the court. Okay, whatever it is. When the chief law enforcement officer of the country, when his office is being accused of breaking the law, who is going to enforce the law? What options are available? Would the court be satisfied with the Inspector General of Police saying, oh, I've asked the head of the legal unit to go and investigate and advise me? So who is going to enforce it? Because if it is enforceable, if that order is enforceable, by now the Inspector General of Police should be in Kuje prison.
Yeah, you see, that's where the problem is. I've always also say that our problems really is not lack of laws, but lack of the willpower to implement the existing law, including court orders. So our president has gone away on this. There's no statement from the spokespersons of the government, nothing whatsoever. And then the IG is left also to, just do whatever he likes. He says, I'm not aware. And so, but
what concrete options are available to him?
Can he quickly
appeal the order?
Even if you can appeal the order, he has every right to appeal the order. But here, we're talking about contempt. Whether, if you appeal the order, whether the court will grant a stay of that same order, because it's like you have disobeyed the court and you're coming back to the same court to say, look, I do not agree with you. This matter had been on in court, the matter was held, a judgment was delivered, and the court had said, go and comply. So also, there were representation from the police when the matter was in the court.
Young was not even allowed to file an appeal.
Exactly.
Yes.
So in this case here, the problem is not just for the courts, because we think that when these orders are disobeyed, that it's a shame on the court that they cannot enforce, because they are handicapped to enforce their order. The people that are supposed to enforce the orders are those that are breaking the orders. But that's where, like I said, these are little things that actually build a society. And that's where the government comes in. If you have a president, a sitting executive who says, I will not allow contempt of court or contempt for the rule of law, nobody working under such a government will violate a court order. When this happens, all you need, the case of Tafa Balogun, because the president was interested in the matter, and you saw if a sitting a former IG, how he was treated.
Rough-handled by mobile police officers.
And so, but here, if that's why I said the IG reports to somebody. We had an IG in this country whose president gave order and he said, I was not aware of such order. We also have a situation in this country where somebody was asking, who is the presidency? So when you have such a situations, in as much as nobody is supposed to be above the law, there are some persons who sees themselves as above the law. If you are a junior officer in some climes, ordinarily, a commissioner of police should be able to enforce that order. The commissioner of police in charge of the FCT or the commissioner of police in charge of legal would have enforced that order, march straight to the IG's office and say, sir, I have a court order for your arrest. That's the way it should be. But here, try it. You'll be dismissed the next day. And then they will say it's overzealousness.
So, so what you're saying invariably is that we have two countries. One for the rich and high and mighty, one for the poor that can go and die. Because if this same contempt of court, Inibehe was put behind bars, he wasn't even given the chance to appeal. He was clean shaven in the end. His human rights was violated in this same country. And we even know under the circumstances at which that was done, was high-handed. Then in this same country, we've had two experiences with the EFCC person and now the police IG. And this cannot be enforced. So are you telling me now with this that what we call the rule of law is dead? Because if we are justifying that some people are above the law, then I don't think we have a country.
Yeah, you see,
the
even
rule of law cannot die.
Yeah,
that would be anarchy.
Exactly.
No, but is this not anarchy? Is this
No,
anarchy?
it is even the rule of law that was used to put Inebehe behind bars, even though the processes and procedures were not strictly followed. Because in that case, he ought to even be put in the dock and asked to show cause, or even given opportunity to purge himself of the contempt, and asked to show cause why he should not be committed. But all of these were jettisoned by the court because he is Inebehe and not the IG of police. And so that's why this musician, what's the name of this musician? African China.
Rich man wasting money, they go see free for crime fighter.
You know, so rich man when steal money, you know, go see him face for crime fighter. But poor man when steal Maggie, you see his face on crime fighters to show that the police is working. So that's what we need to do. If we say there is rule of law and everybody should be equal before the law and the law should be superior, then cases like this should not even come up at all. Because when you hear, in other crime, when you hear that a public officer has been cited for contempt, it can even lead to resignation because it is an abuse of office. It is also an abuse of the public trust that the people repose in you. But here we use siren to drag people from the road because we are now occupying one office and nothing happens. We go about it. But that does not mean that the rule of law is dead. We can, no matter how weak it is, we as a people can revive it. I also like the fact you mentioned something this morning. You said that you advise all candidates to comply and attend public debate platforms. That's one area of enforcing rule of law. It should, in places where debates are convention, it didn't just start by making it one of their laws. It started by becoming a practice and it became a convention. I don't think in America there is a statute that says you must debate. But today it is a convention that non-debating at all reduces your vote issues because, you know, these issues become, you know, their norm. Here, gradually, like I said, the courts are waking up. Before now, no court will dare. They will only ask you to come show cause. Now they have taken it a notch further by saying, look, if you dare do this, I am going to push me to the extreme and I'm going to commit you. Someday, maybe someday we'll have a president who will say, look, you have been committed, vacate the office, and then please escort him to prison until he purges himself of that contempt.
Now that Mr. Patrick Okoli's matter is in the public domain, would this, all of this that, we now know, will it now help him to get justice? Because nowhere in the statement by the Nigerian police force did we hear that the Inspector General is going to take steps to comply. With the order. Instead, he's waiting for the advice of the CP in charge of the legal unit.
That's
so if the CP says ignore the court, will he do so?
I don't think the CP will advise him to ignore the court. And that's the strangest part of it, that rather than talking about how to comply with the order, that's why I like the case of the EFCC. The chairman said, we had complied in parts with the order. We had released these vehicles. There was a misrepresentation somewhere that we had even taken steps. There are documents to show that we have applied for the release of the funds. So at that point, it was easy for the court to say, truly you have purged yourself of the content. But in this case, the police is not even discussing the order, the judgment delivered. They are not also discussing the compliance with the police of the order by the Police Service Commission. You're talking about you not being aware. Indirectly, what the police is doing is indirectly telling people not to approach the court for redress. They are indirectly telling people to resort to self-help. And when people now gradually begin to resort to self-help, knowing fully well that they cannot get justice in the court of law, court of justice, then there will be chaos, anarchy, and doom. And the Nigerian police will not be able to curtail it.
So, please, explain to me. Are you saying invariably that the IG is bigger than an arm of government? My basic education on government, 3 arms of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary. The judiciary, an arm of government, has spoken. IG, that is under the executive, another arm of government, has rebuffed what an arm of government is saying.
Do you know, Rufai, what is happening here is that, like I said, the IG is under an arm of government. He reports to somebody who's appointed to the president. So, if we say no junior officer, no police officer under him can arrest him, what has the president done? What is the president saying? Has there been a statement from the office of the president on that issue? Has the IG be summoned to explain why this happened? If it's an embarrassment, if they see this as an embarrassment, but because even the president had violated court orders before now with impunity and nobody says anything, some persons, felt it was okay. So how do you now insist that your subordinates should enforce or should obey orders that were granted by the same institutions that you happily flaunted? So what we need in all of the discussions about decentralization of powers, restructuring, a president that will drive us to the next destination, we also need to insist that we have a president who understands the position of the law and compliance with the rule of law. This attempt at certain persons feeling that they
But the vice president is a professor of law.
When last did you hear from the vice president?
But the vice president
in
this administration
so
is a
when
professor
last
of law.
did you hear from the office, not even the person at the office?
Well, the vice president can only in this instance exercise delegated authority.
That's where I'm going to.
So he can advise?
That's where,
is that what you're saying? He can advise?
That's where
there's
I'm
an
going
attorney
to.
general of the
There's an
Federation.
attorney general.
There's no attorney general that can advise?
There's an attorney general of the Federation. An attorney general also whose talk in trade, in most cases, is to also disobey court order and say we are studying the order. Do you know sometimes in 2007 a court order was given, I think, sacking about 5 governors. Remember then, Cross River, Bayelsa, and they said, well, we will comply with the order. The first question I asked myself was, do you have a choice in the matter? Saying you will comply means you have a choice not to comply. That's how we have reduced our court orders to. And so in this case, you have the IG who reports to a president. The president should have been able to say, what is this thing I am hearing? I need to see the order. Call me the Attorney General. And that's why when most of these orders are granted, the Attorney General also is instructed to take notice of the order, because he's the chief law officer of the state, who also is to protect the integrity of not just the court, but of justice in the land. But when the Attorney General also turns a blind ear and nothing is coming from the office of the Attorney General, and the police now begins to investigate an order of court after the judgment had been delivered, that's when you're investigating the matter. What we are gradually, progressing to is a situation of anarchy.
In fact, the office of the Attorney General of the Federation is so important that it's the only cabinet position that is expressly identified in the Constitution with its functions.
And that's why people also have argued, quickly, sorry, Doctor, that's why people also have argued that there should be a divorce between the office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. Because the Minister of Justice is like the legal officer to the cabinet. But the Attorney General is the chief law officer of the entire country. So, but we find situations where the interest of the government is paramount in the mind of the Attorney General as against the protection of the sanctity of the law and enforcement of the rule of the land. So, until we separate those two offices, where we'll have a semblance of, making the office of the Attorney General independent so he can begin to take steps to enforce such orders, we will just be going around in circles and say, preach the rule of law, but at the end of the day, some persons will...
The whole argument is to isolate the office of the Attorney General from politics.
Yes.
The Minister of Justice can be a politician, but the Attorney General, his job is to protect the rule of law. Which leads me to the next point. This controversy about the chairman of the Judicial Council and Chief Justice of the Federation, who was slammed with protests yesterday by a coalition of civil society groups, accusing him of descending into the arena, violating Section 5 of the Code of Conduct for Judicial Officers by publicly in Port Harcourt praising Governor Seyi Makinde of Oyo State for identifying with the integrity group. And some persons have been saying his lordship descended into the arena. Section 5 of the Code of Conduct for Judicial Officers does not say you don't have freedom of speech as a judicial officer, but it says you must exercise that with dignity, with restraint, and to avoid the temptation of exposing yourself to political attacks. What is your take on that? Is his lordship innocent or guilty as charged?
Before I pronounce, before I express my opinion, because I won't have the CJN, but I will have an opinion on the matter.
Yeah.
I was first and foremost taken aback when I saw a sitting CJN, in their gathering in Port Harcourt. I was taken aback because just a few weeks ago, while inaugurating the tribunal judges, the CJN admonished judges to distance themselves from politicians. And so to now see the same CJN hobnobbing with the same politicians, I was confused. The office of a judicial officer, a judge, it's almost like a very regimented and secluded life. That's why some of us, even at young age, were like, I don't want to be a judge because I am a social person. I don't want to live a life where you can't relate with people. But now you see judges attend birthday parties of, in some cases, even lawyers. We've seen where lawyers contribute money to judges' children's weddings and in this country. So I completely agree.
Part of our culture.
But then the profession, we should be able to separate the culture from the profession we are in. I completely agree that the CJN should not be seen in such an arena. And that's why before now, including those in government today, where they were in opposition, I had sat down on a program with Alhaji Lai Mohammed, and he had argued then that the CJN should not be enamored with so much powers as to almost nominating everybody, almost 80% of the members of the NJC. So if you have a situation where at the end of the day, the CJN determines members of judicial officers that will sit at a tribunal or sit in a matter over a governorship tussle at the Supreme Court, what would be the justice where a situation where people will now begin to presume that the CJN there will be likelihood of bias in a matter. If you remember the case of Abiola Concord and the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, that almost came to 4, when the matter got to Supreme Court, eventually settled out of court. When the matter got to Supreme Court, and you had about 12 justices of the Supreme Court, and 9 of the judges were litigant in the matter. So how then do you now sit on appeal over your own cause, which was which was against the 2 pillars of natural justice? So in this case, if a CJN is now seen openly identify with a set of governors, Seyi Makinde is going for a second term. And if a matter involving Seyi Makinde's electoral victory gets to the Supreme Court, and then lawyers now begin to question the the impartiality of the CJN, where are we? Have we not ridiculed the judiciary with such an act?
Liborous, Oshoma. Well, one of the points you read, the National Judicial Council, well, people have been saying it should be reformed.
Yes.
One of the arguments in Mohammed Bello Adoke's burden of service.
It is high time we reform it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Always.